All right, so I'm going to read you a story called Grandpa's Face by Eloise Greenfield. Tamika loved her grandpa. She loved the quiet way he talked and the surprise of his loud laughter. She loved the stories he told, long stories that he sang and talked, a little bit each day until he reached the end. Most of all, Tamika loved Grandpa's face. Sometimes Tamika and Grandpa would go out together, just the two of them. They would leave Mama and Daddy at home and go for a walk. A talk walk, Grandpa called it. They'd walk through the park or just around the neighborhood and talk about things they saw and felt and remembered. In the summer, Grandpa was an actor, and some Saturday afternoons, he and his friend, Ms. Gladys, would take Tamika to the theater to watch him act on the stage, if Mama and Daddy said the play wasn't too grown up. The theater was Tamika's favorite place to go. Make-believe things happened there. She would sit in the front row and watch Grandpa turn into another person, changing his face and the way he walked and talked and sang. And even when he turned into somebody else's grandpa, Tamika didn't mind. It looked true and it felt true, but she knew it was just a play. And when it was over, all the actors came out to bow and wave. And she would clap so hard, her hands hurt. One day, Tamika went to Grandpa's room to ask for a story. She stopped at the door because Grandpa was rehearsing. He had his book in his hand and he was reading his lines aloud. Then he stopped reading and looked in the mirror, slowly changing his face into a face that Tamika had never seen before. It was a hard face. It had a tight mouth and cold, cold eyes. It was a face that could never love her or anyone. She got out her jigsaw puzzle and played with it quietly until Mama and Daddy had finished cooking dinner. Then she washed her hands and sat down at the table, but she didn't feel like eating. She felt like doing bad things, all the things that Grandpa didn't like. So she made a hill out of her mashed potatoes and let her green peas roll down the hill. "Stop playing in your food, Tamika," Mama said, "and eat your dinner." Tamika looked at Grandpa's face, and it was still the face she knew. So she put a fork full of greens in her glass and watched her water turn a muddy green. Then she tapped on her plate with her spoon while the grown-ups were trying to talk. "I think you want to leave the table," Daddy said. "No, Daddy," Tamika whined. "I think you'd better, Tamika," Daddy said. "Go to your room now. You can eat by yourself later." Tamika began to cry a little. She looked at her mother and father, but when she started to look at Grandpa too, she felt the scared places in her stomach again, and she was too afraid to look. Then she cried harder. She stood up crying loud, and not watching what she was doing, her hand bumped her glass and knocked it over, sending green water splattering onto Grandpa's shirt and across the tablecloth. I want you to turn and talk to your partner about what you think is going to happen next.
Next, I think that she's going to get sent to her room. She's going to call her grandpa and they're going to talk about how bad things on the front of the cover that happened and show that face when he was laughing at her. So I think he was laughing, but like not making emotions.
Deshaun, what are you thinking as this is our stopping point in the story? What did you and your partner discuss?
His grandpa is gonna yell at her and send her to her room.
Who is it that you think is going to yell at her?
Her grandpa.
What's making you think that?
Because she got like it on his shirt.
Okay. Jackson?
I think it's gonna make him like actually happy, cause of like, you know how it said she did everything he didn't like. Maybe he knew what was happening, and maybe he would like, cause you know how sometimes you get angry at your parents, and then your parents just tell you to come over by you, like when you get angry, your parents tell you to like come over there and all that stuff. I think that's what's gonna happen in the story. He's gonna get a little bit happy and kind of.
So why is she doing the things that she's doing? What do you think's going on with her? Why is she tapping on her glass and putting her greens in her water and acting that way? What do you think's going on? Colette?
I think she's mad
What do you think she's mad about?
that Grandpa's sort of mad
Tell me more about that.
when she saw him in the mirror.
Okay, tell me more. When she saw him in the mirror, what was going on?
He looked angry.
So if he looked angry, what do you think she's doing? Josh?
She's kind of copying her grandpa because at the beginning of the story she said she loved her grandpa, and I think she's copying her grandpa and purposely like knocking over a glass. And I don't think she mean to spill it on grandpa. I think she was just trying to like do something else with the glass or something. Like.
Ella?
I think she thinks that like she's sad because the grandpa like looked mad, so she was like sad that he was mad.
Why is Grandpa so mad?
Maybe he messed up on his song.
Ellie?
He didn't like the script for his play.
You think he was angry about the script in his play? Guy?
Maybe
Hamdan?
maybe he's trying to act out the play because he said he was rehearsing.
Eli?
Maybe if it was actually not, if it actually wasn't the play, it was a note that said, you are not in this year's play or something.
Tamika, what in the world? Grandpa said. Tamika turned and looked at him, then expecting to see the face she had seen in the mirror. But it was Grandpa's face she saw. Grandpa's mad face, but still, it was the one that loved her. Mama and Daddy looked worried. Tamika, Mama said, what's this all about? Tamika hung her head and didn't answer. Stop crying now, Daddy said. He wiped her face while Grandpa went to change his shirt. Then Grandpa came back and took her by the hand. Let's go, he said. Time for a talk walk. Tamika and Grandpa walked toward the park, holding hands. Now tell me, what's wrong? Grandpa said. Tamika's hand felt good inside Grandpa's, but she wasn't sure she felt like talking. She watched the lines in the sidewalk for a little while. Then she said, you have another face, Grandpa. I do? Grandpa said. Uh-huh. I saw it in the mirror, Tamika said. And it's a real mean face, too. They sat down on the grass, and and Tamika let the words spill out. "The mouth is mean and the eyes are mean, and I don't like that face, Grandpa," she said. "But that's just pretending, Tamika," Grandpa said. "You know that." "But it might not always be pretend," Tamika said. Grandpa thought for a moment. "Oh, I see," he said. Then he put his hands around Tamika's face and made her look at him. "I love you," he said. "I could never, ever look at you like that, no matter what you do. You hear?" "You sure?" Tamika said. "As sure as I am that you love me," Grandpa said. Tamika knew she was safe then, safe enough to hug Grandpa and kiss the sturdy brown of his face. Grandpa hugged her back. "Let's go home now," he said. On the way home, Grandpa stopped to talk to an old friend, but Tamika didn't pay any attention to what they were saying. She was much too busy watching a wave of laughter as it spread across her grandpa's face. So I want you to turn and talk to your partner about what was so upsetting to Tamika. What was really what she was upset about? Why was that face upset?
She was mad because she spilled whatever it was. She was like scared. Yeah, on our grandpa's shirt. Grandpa was mad. That's why she got because she got in trouble.
As I turn and talk to my partner, remember yesterday we discussed how we can make sure that both of us are being heard and that our partner is truly engaged in what they're saying? What were some of the things we said we need to make sure we do when we're turning and talking to a partner? Evan?
That speak for half of the time.
Okay. If I speak for half of the time, do you know how much time that is? Because you don't know how long it's going to be. It's only a minute or so that I let you turn and talk. So how do you, sometimes only 30 seconds. So how do you know when half of the time is? How do you deal with that? Ella?
Like someone starts talking and then the other person just like joins in and like says like stuff about what they were talking about.
Remember we talked about that ping pong match and how a conversation goes back and forth? Okay. So if I tell one idea, I don't keep telling all my ideas. I tell one idea, and then my partner gets to respond with what they think about my idea or what idea they might have. So what did you decide? What was so upsetting to Tamika? Pragya?
Grandpa's face.
Tell me more about that.
Like when Tamika saw Grandpa's face in the mirror, she thought Grandpa must be angry at her, so she like made a mashed potato mountain and rolled her green peas down and put her vegetable in the water and spilled it on Grandpa's shirt.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on what Tamika was so upset about? She saw that angry face. What was the true upset about that? Ellie?
That someday she was gonna make him that angry and he was gonna make that face to her, and she doesn't like how that face looks.
So she worried about something that wasn't even really happening, didn't she? She saw that face and thought, I can't, that's not my grandpa's face, and what if he shows that face to me? What if he acts like that to me? So she was upset about that, and Grandpa understood, didn't he? I want to just mention that I appreciate when your classmates are speaking. I watched Carter and Josh and Ella and Deshaun all turn their faces to the person who's speaking. It's really important that no matter who's talking, our eyes and our heads shift to that person. Our whole body doesn't need to, but to help us stay engaged in it. Okay. So today at the writing area, I want you to take a minute to write a little short story about a time that you were upset about something, that something bothered you or something upset you. I don't want a story that goes on for days and days and days. I want you to take a snapshot. I want you to picture just that moment that you were really upset. And I want you to tell me a beginning, middle, and end as to what was upsetting about that. So I'm going to give you just a minute to think. And then turn and talk to your partner about some different times that you're upset. And it doesn't have to be the one that you're writing about, but I want everybody to just take a minute to think, what are some times that you have been upset? Because all of us have been upset before, right? So think about some times that you've been upset. And then turn and tell your partner about a couple of those times, very briefly. We've all had times that we've been upset, and when we start thinking about it, we can probably come up with lots of them. It doesn't have to be a big, major thing that you're upset about. My son came home from school yesterday, and he said to me, Mom, one of the kids in my class, when I was typing, came over, and I had my slap bracelet on. He took my slap bracelet, and he bent it backwards, and now when I go to slap it on my wrist, it won't click on. That's something that upset him. Could he tell me a beginning, a middle, and an end to that story? He actually did. He went on to tell me that it was writing time and he was working on his essay and, kind of gave me a little information about that. He was working on the computer and the teachers were conferencing with people. And then this student came over and said, what are you writing about? What's that? Can I see it? And reached down and pulled it off of his hand. And he said, give me back my bracelet. And the kid took it and he bent it in half backwards. And then he went, oh. And he's like, you just broke it. And the kid said, I didn't know it was going to break. Sorry. And he walked away. And then the teacher went and talked to the student about that wasn't a good choice, and Austin got an apology, but he came home and told me, it wasn't really that big of a deal, Mom. It still goes on. It doesn't have to be a huge story, but it can be just one little small incident that you had. It could be about that time that you just accidentally ended up going out for recess and you forgot to bring your football out. Okay? It can be a time that you were walking down the hallway and you dropped, your crayons and they went rolling down the hallway and that was upsetting to you. How many of you have walked into the lunchroom and have dropped a lunch tray with food on it? Oh my gosh, it happens to almost everyone. All right. How many of you have had an accident? Either you wet your pants or you threw up or something. Come on, you were in kindergarten, you were in preschool. Do you remember that happening? Sure. Would that be upsetting to you? Yeah. How many of you, excuse me, thank you. How many of you have gone to, gotten really excited about going to like a birthday party or some event and then you got disappointed or something upset you that happened, right? So I want you to pick that one. Everybody get an idea in your head and turn and tell your partner what is it you're going to write about when you get to the writing area today.
I want to write about